If you haven't heard me say this before, let me begin with thank you. Thank you, FBC, for all your support of the CityReach project, and once again, generously sharing your time, treasure, and talent. Many UU churches participate in the CityReach Common Cathedral project as part of the Youth Coming of Age program. Last June, as part of a brainstorming meeting between local UU churches, where we were trying to make meaning of chaos and finding ways to facilitate the re-entry of our youth back to church, we came up with the idea of collaborating in a CityReach project, open to everyone, all ages. I never imagined where the journey would go, and it went where I never imagined it would go. So here to tell you about this journey are these extraordinary women: Ashanti Wilson-Moreau, Stephanie Owens, Nora, Frances Killam, and Diane Morris. So once upon a time,
Hi, I am Ashanti. I am a young adult at this church, and recently I joined some of the church's congregation in Boston at the CityReach retreat. I heard about the program from Dolores in one of the young adults meetings, and it captured my attention because it reminded me of when, before I was adopted, how I might have been young, but I was old enough to still be scared of not having somewhere permanent, or even someone permanent in my life. I don't think that the fear of unknown ever goes away, because I still maybe have the fear of people in my life just disappearing. When I got to Boston, after quite a few detours and getting lost along the way, I realized how nervous I really was. We walked into the St. Paul's Common Cathedral Church, and we walked into the sign-in desk. We were a little late, so all of the groups were already inside, and we were welcomed into the circle where everyone was gathered. And in the circle, we met and bonded with other volunteers from other churches and staff that included some of the people who were homeless that volunteered them. We ended up meeting Frank, who was our guide. We split up in groups, and we went with our guides to a little tour that our guide talked about what it is like to have to go from shelter to shelter. I thought that talking to Frank was going to be difficult because I did not know what it's like living on the streets. But I immediately found out that Frank was a really smart guy, and he really wasn't all that different from us. I was nervous when we were outside the shelter because of some of the people we encountered. I knew I was safe because I was part of a group, and we went back to the church afterwards and had snack time with all the church groups, and then we went to bed. We woke up really early, which for once was really difficult for me. I am not used to not having a mattress or pillows and blankets, and usually not a lot of people around me. We helped set up things for people who were homeless in the morning to come in and get clothing and food. Then they walked in and got some of the stuff they needed. I wish that more people from the congregation could have come and helped out, because we were the smallest group by far, so we had to do a lot of scrambling to get things done. And I wish that if we can do this program again, that we might have more people who come and join us.
I was the driver that got us lost. Hi, I'm Stephanie Owen, and I'm happy to be here today to share my reflections about the experience of participating in CityReach. I've been a social worker for over 20 years, and I've worked with many people in a variety of difficult circumstances. I was interested in seeing the perspective of the lived experience of homelessness in a way that my career hasn't shown it to me. And I wanted to support First Parish Chelmsford in trying something new. As we met to prepare for this service and reminisced about our experience, I realized that it was likely intentionally set up to mimic what the experience of being in a shelter would be like. something that didn't occur to me while I was there going through it. We were kept on a schedule, moved from one place to another, didn't have so many choices about what we ate or when we ate. And we slept in a large room where we just had to find our own space among 80 other people and sleep or not for the night until they woke us in the early morning. Our church was tasked with organizing the coats that had been donated by all of the congregations. And one thing I noticed through that experience was how important it was that the donations be given with dignity. It was certainly a demonstration of everyone's worth and dignity to be able to provide clean, warm coats from which the guests would choose, even when the choice was maybe that we didn't have anything that worked for them. Some of us had gone to the Goodwill Weigh and Pay ahead of time with the grant money that was provided by the congregation, and so we washed all of those clothes and prepared them and organized them. And the same with your donations, organizing all of those. So I want to thank you for giving your donations with dignity. Some of the things that came in from bags with other places were quite interesting. Full suits, coats that were dirty, and a beautiful North Face jacket with a giant L-shaped rip in the front that thankfully Frances had her sewing kit and stitched it together, much to the delight of one of the guests. A couple of reflections I wanted to share with you is a number of years ago I was at a conference where Father Greg Boyle spoke, and he's the founder of Homeboy Industries in LA that helps gang-involved people find a new path. And what he said was, and what kept coming back to me while we were there, is stand in awe of what the poor must carry instead of in judgment at how they carry it. The last thing that I wanted to share with you was that Reverend Mary of the Common Cathedral, who led us through a number of reflections, I really enjoyed some of the things that she shared. And I want to take you through an experience that she took us through. So I ask you all to just clasp your hands together and notice which thumb you have on the top. Now I want you to switch them so you have the wrong thumb on top. And just notice what that feels like. It feels a little weird, right? It feels a little unnatural, a little uncomfortable. This is where Reverend Mary asked us to be during our experience. It's just a little outside of our comfort zone. She told us if we got where we were like this, that was too far, we should take a break. What I like about that is that idea of pushing myself to a space where I feel just a little bit uncomfortable. Offering radical hospitality might feel a little uncomfortable or weird at first, but that's okay. That's how we know we're growing. So my 15-year-old daughter also joined us on the trip, Nora, and she is not up here with us, but she is in the room. Being in the room is like this for her. Being up here would be like this. So I'm going to share her words. My mom asked me to join her in attending the CityReach program. I wanted to get a perspective on what it was like being homeless. It's going to sound kind of mean, but like the homeless and recently homeless people we met were a lot more like a regular human than I expected them to be, which I don't like saying, but I kind of expected they would have a lot more issues than they did. I think most of these people ended up homeless just because of bad luck or circumstance. It just happens. It was challenging for me to be there because there were a lot of people, and I do not like interacting with people. I thought it was going to be a small thing where we handed out sandwiches, but it turned out to be a whole department store. I was glad our group was small because it wasn't super overwhelming. I got to sleep on the floor with a bunch of people I barely knew, but I also was surrounded by people I kind of knew from First Parish. It was kind of like a weird family outing, except they weren't my family. I think people who are homeless create a chosen family sometimes, and so it kind of maybe mimics that experience. Towards the end of the program, all the teens and young adults had to take all of the leftover clothes to a mission about a half-mile away. It was raining, and we were each carrying a garbage bag full of donations and following the CityReach staff. I guess to lift morale, the staff started singing "This Little Light of Mine," and everyone joined in. It was like a very strange parade. I'm not sure I would go again, but I hope other people will try it. I think people who have negative stereotypes about people who are homeless should go, and people who want to gain a new perspective, and people who like sleeping on hard marble floors. So Frances is going to lead us in this little light of mine.
Okay. Okay. So, this little light of mine, everywhere I go, building up a world. Okay? We know it. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Hey, everybody. Did I set them down someplace? Okay, so you remember how we said we got lost sometimes?
Oh, I have them.
Hi. Okay. I'm Frances. Hi. When I heard about CityReach from Dolores, I was interested, but also pretty topped up with volunteering for other committees around church, so I wasn't planning on going. But then I heard that our participation in CityReach might not run if we didn't get enough volunteers, and I didn't want that to happen, so I signed up. I have a little experience with homeless folks because I listen to NPR, and I work with Community Table, which is a team of First Parish volunteers who prepare lunch the third Saturday of the month for some of the food insecure who live in Lowell, some of whom I think are homeless. I realized I knew so little about them and their experience, and it seemed like the CityReach program might be a good opportunity to learn more. On Friday night, part of the program was to take a walk around the city with our appointed mentor, Frank, and get his take on being unhoused. Frank had recently found housing, and he didn't want to talk about the experience of homelessness. Instead, he talked a lot about all the different resources he had to use to get through the day. It's hard work to take advantage of all the different resources and various programs. On Monday, you could get lunch from this time to this time. And on Tuesday, lunch was someplace else with different hours. And you could You used to be able to go to South Station to rest, but now you can only stay for 2 hours. Clothing might be available at this place at that time, always having to be at the right place at the right time. Just hearing about it was exhausting. It was hard work to be homeless. After our walk, all the groups met up at a fountain on the common. I was talking with some of our adults, and it was Christmas time, and we were all talking about various preparations we were making. One of my preparations is to ask my kids, who are now young adults, what tastes they need to have to know they've had Christmas. And one of the things that they like is a particular kind of eggnog, which is hard to find. And then Frank joined our conversation, and I had a moment of panic. We were talking about a problem that any unhoused person would be happy to have. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know whether to carry on with the conversation or try to quickly change the subject to something that was more appropriate. But in a moment of grace, Frank just looked at me and smiled and said, "Spumante and panettone." He was Italian, and those were his tastes of Christmas. We went back to the church, and I will admit that my yoga mat and sleeping bag were no match for the hard marble floor. I was grateful to get up at 6:30. After breakfast, I was heading upstairs to help set up our part of the virtual department store we were creating. We were Coats. There was a woman at the glass doors that were the main entrance to the church. She was angry and rattling the doors and shouting to be let in. She shouted that she worked there and she was wearing the right vest. But we had been told that if we had to come and go from the church, we had to use a side door and not the front door, which was locked. I tried to explain that to her and tell her that I would go down to the side door to help her get in, but she didn't hear me. And she was still shouting and rattling at the door. And I had to go, and somebody came up to her and took her down to the side door to let her in. After we were all finished and having lunch, I saw the woman eating and talking with her friends. So I went up to her table, and I apologized for not opening the door. She looked at me and she said kind of dismissively, "It's not important. Have a nice life." I walked away, and I was sad that she had not accepted my apology. She did not participate in the unspoken social contract of contrition and forgiveness. And it came to me that she had every right to her anger, that it was not her job to make me feel better. And I sat with that for a while. Before I went to CityReach, I did think about how my privilege as a financially secure white person with a home of my own made it easy for me to know about homelessness from a distance. And I have to admit that I was worried about being ashamed for it. And that did happen. But also, I got to know some really good people from my church and from the CityReach program. And the universe gave me the gentlest of slaps and allowed me to see my place in a much bigger and wilder and kinder community than I knew before.
Hi, my name is Diane Morris, and hi. And I heard of CityReach before in my previous church, and at that time, years ago, CityReach and a mission trip were two experiences I was very interested in attending, but they were being attended by my very independent teenage daughter who wanted to have those experiences on her own. So fast forward a few years, and here I am, having recently moved to Lowell, church shopping, and now attending this church since October. What drew my interest to your trip to CityReach was a sense of adventure. Could I sleep on the floor? Would I feel a bit lost? Would I feel odd not having my own teenager with me? What was the worst thing that could happen if I decided just to go, knowing no one there, not even the UUers who were carpooling with me? Well, I had a great time. I got to know Francis and Stephanie on the drive there and back, and at our shared meals during all the moments we had between activities and while organizing the donations. I enjoyed getting to share with my borrowed teenagers. I got to help in several other ways, like when there was a big get-to-know-you interaction at the beginning, and I got to do that with Nora. I got to find one last peanut butter and jelly sandwich for Ashante. We got to share meals with our CityReach guides and the homeless guests who came to the Saturday clothing distribution event. I got to meet incredibly kind and interesting people from other churches. One of the church attendees there was a young man who was a youth leader at my previous church a bunch of years ago, and now he's an associate pastor at a church in Acton. We got to catch up with each other, a wonderful and unexpected surprise. I got to interact with a population I typically only see from a distance in small tent encampments in Lowell. When I heard the CityReach guides' stories, all who were at one point previously homeless, I thought about how quickly things in your life can change. If you did not grow up with a geographically or emotionally close family, if you got sick and were living paycheck to paycheck, if you had a mental illness and there was no one to step in and guide you through the complicated systems in place, which offer only pieces to the solution, but not a completely integrated solution. And then I realized after the trip, when I got home back from Boston, and I received the exuberant greeting from my dog, that I was not only thankful that I had my home, but then I knew in my heart that I had found my new church home.